So, the masterminds of media over at Sony just announced that starting 2028, all of their games will be exclusively digital. They will no longer be releasing physical copies to their games. Like, no more discs, no more floppy disks, nothing like that. It is gonna be purely digital, because who in their right mind would want something as obsolete as physical media? Now, I know a lot of people are going to yap about this if they haven't already, but I myself have a personal connection to collecting physical media, not video games necessarily, but I think it's extremely important to preserve consumers' right to actually own their media. I mean, Sony has pulled some stuff like this before. The whole thing with like the movie library. I don't even know if you can still do this, but you used to be able to like purchase movies through the PlayStation Store, and a bunch of people got a ton of their movies that they paid for taken away from them. If I'm not mistaken, it was because of like the licensing agreements and stuff expired, but that just goes to show, even if you pay for something digitally, it can be ripped away from you just like that, because it's not actually yours. You don't actually own anything when you buy digital. And I mean, for as long as video games have been a thing, the answer to that problem has always been to just buy the physical disc. That way, no one can take it away from you. The actual game file is on the disc. It's downloadable. It is yours. But it seems here that Sony is trying to move away from that. They don't want you to own anything. They don't want you to own what you pay absurd amounts of money for. On top of raising the prices of their consoles, which to a certain level I know they don't really have a lot of control over, but to drop this fucking gobbledygook on us on top of all of that is just, it's honestly a gut punch. And let me tell you why. Let me tell you why you should still care about this, even if you don't have a PlayStation or even use any Sony products. Sony is already like one of the leading companies in the gaming space, and once they make this a norm, once they make exclusively digital content a norm, we're cooked. As gamers, as consumers in general, we're cooked. After a certain point, we will no longer own anything. We will be forced to only buy digital if we want to play new games. I hope to God that companies like Microsoft and, Nintendo do not follow this pattern, do not follow this trend. But honestly, if Sony actually ends up going through with this, if this actually ends up being a norm for Sony, I can't imagine a world where Nintendo wouldn't follow and Microsoft wouldn't follow, because how else would they compete? And it's not even like people don't want to buy physical media. It's not like there's no demand for it. There's people like me who, if given the opportunity, would spend thousands upon thousands of dollars on physical CDs, vinyls, and even video games. There's a lot of money in physical media, but there's just this part of me that thinks that corporations like Sony don't really care about that. They just don't want you to truly own anything. And that's why I think this is a really slippery slope. It starts with video games, and what's next? We're already dominated by mostly streaming services. It just feels as if this decision by Sony is like a turning point in the world. And I honestly, it just feels like it's not going in the right direction for consumers. Not saying as if I think physical media as a whole is gonna just be completely abolished, but I mean, that is the concern here. But let's not be a bunch of close-minded swines. Let's get into the counter argument a little bit here. Sony themselves have said that this is a natural decision that they had to adopt due to quote-unquote consumer trends. Basically what they're saying is that there is a general preference for digital media that outpaces that of physical media. And because of this, they want to enable themselves to align more closely to how most of their community prefers to access and play their games. Now, obviously, it's a known fact that less and less people are buying physical games. They are not lying when they say that most of their entire player base has an almost exclusively digital library. And if we look at this counter argument deeper, we could even say that nowadays owning physical games is equally as pointless. Because a lot of the time, the new games that come out, you can't just play them off of the disc. It still requires active support and updates. The sad fact is that newer games are becoming harder and harder to preserve for long periods of time, especially with most of them being live service. It's kind of hard to actually own something like that when all somebody has to do is shut down a server and what you paid for is completely gone. I mean, that's the ultimate goal here for them. They don't want you stuck on the same games you were stuck on just 10 years ago, no matter how much money they can make out of it. They want you constantly and constantly buying new and new games, participating in a super short consumer cycle. You are nothing but a money printer to them. And if you think you're safe just because you don't play video games, this is the start of something big. This will trickle down into absolutely everything. Moving forward, we as consumers are going to own less and less and less. So after reviewing multiple viewpoints here, conclusion for me kind of settles at this was always bound to happen one way or another. Either way, most games that aren't like story games that come out nowadays are really hard to preserve, even on a physical disc for like large periods of time. But for the games that are story driven and have very little to no online features, it's gonna suck. It's gonna really suck not being able to own those games, especially if they're good. But you know, corporate greed wins again. The elites are cracking those bottles of baby blood open and they're absolutely hooting and hollering right now. They don't want what's best for us. They just want to drain us of everything that we have. Yeah, hopefully this gave you some fruit for thought. You know, the world is definitely heading into a pretty scary place for sure. Even if you don't think this is that serious, it's just video games. It's honestly a breach of consumer rights in general. But yeah, I just wanted to yap about that one real quick. Later, man.